Look at this beautiful place. People park down. I just saw that people were parking down by the side of the road on 72. And there's nothing that really indicates exactly what this land is. If it's open space, you know, state or federal or private. But there's, you know, not a lot there. But people are obviously coming back here, and it's a hike, and it looks like it's mostly local people. And we've had a lot of rain finally, and when the water's moving and churning, it's just so beautiful and peaceful, and it's just so good for your mind and your body to do a little hike like this when you can find it. And be careful, you know, like these trails aren't really marked very well. They're well worn because a lot of people, both sides, hike it a lot, but it's not really very much of a guided trail. So, you know, the best thing here for me, there's other trails that branch off, it's just to kind of stay near the river, because it's real easy to find your way back. This thing's only going in one direction, and the car is parked down by it. But you also take a look at your time when you get off and do a hike like this. Don't do anything foolish, and look at your clock when you start, because time, you know, is a great way to remember distance. If you don't take a look at what time it is when you start walking, it can add to confusion if you get lost. The time is a really big help in that way. And back in the time when people wore like watches with a dial on them, also you could kind of align the dial with the sun and kind of have an estimate of how much the sun has moved based on time, especially if you just kind of got an idea of what time of year it is. It doesn't take any really great astrological knowledge. You just know if you know what sunrise is and what time sundown is, then you can kind of estimate you know, about where the sun is in the sky based on the time of day that it is. And then if you know how many hours have gone by, if you kind of align your watch with the sun when you start, you kind of can know about where the sun's supposed to be, and convert that into a direction, because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It's really kind of in the northern hemisphere, it rises more in the southeast and sets in the northwest, and you can kind of get a pretty good idea of compass direction too that way. So anyhow, all of these things are very important, and they can all be acknowledged, you know, they can all be compared to many other aspects of life. In other words, when you start off on anything, it can be more metaphorical. It's really just because things don't happen in the physical world and a lot of things happen in our mind, it doesn't mean that the same principles apply. So there's many things that you can do when you start off on doing something, a project, or starting school, or starting to learn something new, starting a business. You can take markers and points at different along the way so that you have direction of where you came from and where you're going. And as you know, famously Steve Jobs said, you can only really connect the dots looking backwards. So it's important, as you get more and more experience in something, or you go further and further along the path, that you kind of think back through everything that got you to where you're at. And it's also very, very important to remember that things happen in steps. Sometimes you'll get to a certain place and you'll be like, oh, I could have done this much earlier. And in some cases, possibly you could have. But usually things have to build on top of one another, and there's a lot of mathematics behind that. So with business, for example, you know, you have a combination of what you're learning, your product, your placement, your marketing, and the amount of capital you have to work with. And so it's kind of the same thing with hiking. You have, especially if you think about it in more of a longer term adventure, not a little short hike like this. But you know, you have a certain amount of rations of food, and you have a certain amount of energy, and a certain amount of time in the day, and a certain amount of knowledge about the landscape that you're in. And all of those things play a role in what makes the best path and how you build towards getting to your final goal. So in life, it's really good to begin a practice when you're young on the little simple things that they do matter a lot, but they don't have, the consequences might not be as high as when you get older, largely because you don't have as many things that you're responsible for when you're young, you know. children are learning, and young people, we're always learning through life, but it's particularly interesting that society as a whole really recognizes that young people are the future, and that these young people like yourself are learning how to be the future, the future of society. And we just kind of inherently know that. So when you're young, take your experiences and learn what the word sequence means, and learn that things happen in a certain order to get the best results. There's games are a good way to see that. Like you don't win a game at the beginning necessarily, but the things that you do in the beginning lead you to whether or not you're really going to be, how successful you're going to be at the game. So the most easy one to think of in terms of sequencing is something like chess, because it's mostly just it's a game of patterns. So it's a really good analogy to think about the importance of sequences. You start, if you right from the very beginning of the game, the kind of steps that you make a big difference in how the game ends. And you can do that with a lot of things. You can look at it many other games, but chess is just it's very much, that is what chess is. So you don't have a lot of other complications like you would say in a game of like football or baseball, or although those things, the sequence is important there too. And especially with baseball it takes a little bit more understanding of the game, but it's actually very much a part of mathematics, because every team has anything can go in any different direction in any game of baseball. But over the course of a season, your team is designed a certain way. You have a certain amount of players who have a certain statistical ability to hit the ball a certain amount of times, to get on base a certain amount of times, hit a home run a certain amount of times. And you got to design your team that fits those abilities and talents of those players. And that's a really good analogy for life and how to take the steps. You got to look at your strengths and weaknesses, and the people that you're working with, strengths and weaknesses, and you need to chart your course based on those things. All right, so it's different for every different group, but many different people find success going many different routes, because they have this understanding of, you can't put the cart before the horse, is the old saying. You can't do this thing before you accomplish this thing. And if you start learning to do that when you're young with little simple things, it could be anything that you work on. It's just more of a mindset that you're developing. If you pay attention to what were the steps that made this work, and I didn't do well at this thing, why did I make the wrong steps, and then evaluate your skills and your talents in doing that. And if you do that as a practice when you're young, it'll become part of the way that you think about life. And so when you get older, it'll just be a part of the way that you see things and you work on things, and it'll be a huge favor to yourself. And you can find books and different things that people have written that allude to all of what I'm talking about, that can also help you learn about this. But just keeping your path clear, doing the things that are right, setting that compass in your heart in the right direction. Don't let other people drag you off course. And all of these things will take a wonderful, smart human being like yourself, capable human being, and be grateful for the fact that you're healthy and these things, because a lot of people aren't. And as you get older and older, you'll start to realize not only is that something to be grateful for, but it's also sort of a responsibility that you have. People who have certain skills and talents and health and wellness, as you get older, you start to understand that you have a commitment to do well in the things that you're doing, because it helps to benefit all of us, right? When people are successful in what they're doing, it adds to the overall success and the ability for us as a society to take care of one another, even in ways that aren't direct or you don't see directly. So I love you, and take every little part of life and be grateful for it, and to use it as a way to start building a good mindset for yourself.